There.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, folks. We're about to start our final session, or almost final session, for racial equity. And we're going to present on our racial equity framework and specifically focus on the principle in the framework of honoring the journey toward racial equity, justice, and healing. There's going to be some movement in this activity, in this exercise and activity. So I'm going to ask you folks, first of all, to stand.
What we doing?
We're going to dance for a little bit. No, actually, we're going to look to migrate towards the back of the room, and then we're going to look to migrate to different groups for a little bit, as far as doing some movement is concerned. If you feel like you need to have your items secured, make sure you put them in one, organize yourself as much as possible. When we do go, we're going to look to go into 3 groups as part of our activity. So we're going to look to you to join me the 2 tables. These 2 tables here, those 2 tables there, and the 2 tables at the back. Okay, when we get to that. For now, please migrate to the back of the room, towards my left corner in the back over here. Oh yeah, everybody's moving for now, just for now. Sorry, let's say you're a donut in the morning for breakfast kind of person. Put your hand up, go over here, migrate over here. If you like donuts in the morning, you want to migrate over here. Yes. If you don't like donuts in the morning, migrate over here. Let's say you're a donuts in the morning person. I like donuts in the morning. Migrate over here to my left. You don't like donuts in the morning, go over here. Meet the person to your left and to your right. Alrighty. Thank you very much. Let's say you like bagels in the morning. Bagels, B-A-G-E-L-S. You like bagels, you don't like donuts, you prefer, or you may like donuts, but you prefer bagels. If you like bagels more than donuts, go over here. Any kind of bagel. You like
diabetes for the donut.
Now again, introduce yourself to the person to your left and to the person to your right. We're almost there. Let's say you know, we're not talking about you directly. You know someone who has had an experience of homelessness, firsthand, outside of work, beyond work, outside of your work environment. Come to the middle of the room.
Everybody gonna be in the middle, that's not fair. We all going to the middle.
Again, introduce yourself to the person to the left, to your left, and to the person to your right. All right, please look in my direction. Please also notice, I'm not trying to other or ostracize you, but we do have one of our members who doesn't know persons outside of work in terms of who have experienced homelessness. Let's say you know somebody who has died while being unhoused or being homeless. Go to that corner of the room.
Follow me, I know somebody.
Say personal qualifier or just invite people?
Preferably personal. Again, look to the person to your left, look to the person to your right. All righty, folks. Thank you very much for participating. Please return to your seat. So while you're returning to your seats, you may notice on the screen here, on our title screen for us, and please have a seat. Please return to your tables and have a seat, unless you choose to stand. Please look here on our slide for our presentation. You will see a QR code. If you scan that QR code, it will help you to get to a digital copy of the slide deck that we're using. It will also help you to get to a copy of our racial equity framework draft, and we'll get to a form for reflections as well. You'll be able to access all three of those through the QR code. The QR code is also on this. There should be a few copies of this at each table, or most of the tables that you will end up. The QR code is also in the corner there that you'll be able to scan the document, okay? And get to the copies of the materials, just so you'll be able to follow along. All right, so we're gonna get started. We're gonna use some time to talk about the framework, the principle of honoring the journey, and then we're gonna try to spend most of our time in the actual groups to dialogue about this principle as far as moving towards racial equity is concerned. Then we're gonna have some time for reflection and for sharing. By way of introduction, again, my name is Nick Ming. I use a he or a they pronoun. I serve as a member of the Racial Equity Committee. I also want to ask folks who also serve on the Racial Equity Committee to please stand. If you serve on as a voting member or you attend, please stand. We have Kim from Home Base Tunisia, who is our co-chair, Shate, who is co-chair of the HMIS committee and one of our liaisons, Sunita, who is one of our liaisons, Ms. Shelley, who is also a liaison. Thank you all. All right, so just some quick agreements for our session. Confidentiality. The details of what we share here should remain here, but we're asking you please to take the lessons away. Go with the lessons, right? Take space, leave space as far as the conversation is concerned. We want to have your active participation and listening. We also want to be able to have you listen to be able to just understand, not necessarily look to respond to everything that you're hearing, and to be able to engage in the process, sit with the things, especially some of the discomfort that may come up for us. We want to be able to own our intentions and also be accountable and recognize that our intentions may not necessarily be the resulting impact that we intend, right? And if that is so, hold ourselves, own our accountability in those instances. We want to be able to acknowledge and honor that participating equitably in these conversations requires emotional labor and is emotional work. And so, and in particular, that the communities of folks who are impacted by these experiences, people of color, LGBTQ folks, people with lived experience of homelessness, have an additional layer of work to do, and that requires time to be able to achieve that. I want to be able to say thank you again to the folks who work through their nervousness and anxiety to come up here and speak about their experience, and also to be able to ask that you take the time that you need during this exercise and activity to be able to participate fully after doing that activity just previously, right? So thank you all for that again. Right. So, I think the last time we were here, we presented on the draft of the framework. So we're spending a lot of time doing this year is working with our community or COC to familiarize folks with the concepts that are in the framework, as well as to begin to work with our respective committees as far as implementing the material or the principles in the framework is concerned in the work of their respective committees. And so this conversation basically is to help, this activity is to help you to understand some of what those conversations are like, right, at the committee level. When we do get into the groups, we will use examples of what's happening at a few of our committees at their level to talk about how we're moving towards implementing and embedding equity is concerned in our COC. However, while you're in those groups, the activities and the conversations, the dialogue in those groups that we'll have in a moment will not solely be focused on the committees. We'll get a chance to talk about what your equity journey is as an individual for you. Because ultimately, what happens in our committees happens through us, right? Not just individually, but how we show up to be able to participate in the work of the committee. So we'll have a two-layer kind of conversation while you're in the groups to focus on the more collective or committee scenario as well as your individual basis. All right. So our racial equity framework has 9 principles, essentially. And the principles as we have them are about leading with equity design, being able to dismantle white supremacy, being able to honor the journey towards equity and racial justice, being able to decenter whiteness, to look at grounding the work that we do in data, to be able to conduct root cause analysis, to be able to be accountable to Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and to acknowledge the harm, especially governmental harm that's been done historically, and checking implicit biases. Again, if you look at the QR code on the sheet, you'll be able to get to the full document as the Racial Equity Framework draft. We're focusing today on the principle of honoring the journey. Now, reminder, this is not the work of immediate miracles. This requires time. It's long-term work. It's work for the long haul. And so we always want to be able to anchor ourselves in that, right? It's not immediate results. And so as far as honoring the journey is concerned, as a principle, I'll just read this here. This work requires long-term commitment. And it begins in acknowledging historical harms and the present oppression that's resulted from those historical harms, right? We're talking about the oppression of Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, and working intentionally and actively to resist and strategically address the conditions that continue to be perpetuated, and which shows the kind of inequities that we live in and see on a day-to-day basis as far as homelessness work is concerned. We want to hold ourselves in a position where we see ourselves as being all accountable as participants in this system, right? And begin the hard work of healing and racial justice that requires sustained and coordinated efforts as far as being able to address and eradicate the different forms of oppression and injustice that we see in our system. And also, again, to be able to do this effort, not just on a collective basis or macro basis as far as our homelessness response system is concerned, but on our own individual basis as well, right? So we're working twofold constantly and as much as possible, as consistently as we can. Any questions so far? What does that journey look like? So thanks to one of our TAs, thanks to our primary TA, Chloe Green, we got good support with drafting this deck and getting this image, right? And so this is basically to help us conceptually to understand what this journey can look like, right? So here on the left, I'm over here on the left in my own little clueless bubble as far as not being able to start anything yet as far as being on the racial equity journey is concerned. Then we have a next step where, something happens in my life, I get to a moment where I become curious about what this may be like, right? And so we want to be able to acknowledge that, this is something that exists. I may be curious, but am I active as far as trying to explore that curiosity is concerned? Maybe not yet, right? And then I may get to the stage of planning, which is another stage. And that means I've started to think more actively about it. But it also means that I haven't necessarily taken any action yet. I'm still in that thinking, mulling stage, trying to understand more, trying to put something together as far as some potential steps are concerned. And then we get to the launch stage, which is where we begin now to start taking action and having some movement as far as being able to develop some kind of practice is concerned. And demonstrable practice. So it has to be evident, it has to be out there, being seen and so forth. It's not about me in my mirror saying, I'm a racial equity champion. It means when I get to a meeting, I may want to say something that demonstrates that I'm a racial equity champion, right? And then we want to talk about being on the way. Back to being launched. But it means, when you at the launch stage, part of what we experience is that you're not yet, as far as your practice is concerned, so robust. It's not so built yet where you're at the stage where you're evaluating and reflecting actively in terms of what's the result of my action or my activity as far as racial equity is concerned. That's still at the launch stage, right? We take another step further in terms of moving to the next stage, which is on the way. And at that stage, there's a lot more active reflection, there's a lot more activity, there's a lot more demonstration in terms of what we're doing and what's evident, right? And there's a lot more consistency and commitment. So there's a building of a practice at that point that didn't exist before. So that's what in my layman's term, I think about that's the point where you're gaining traction, okay, and momentum. And then we get to the phase of having embedded practice, right? And this is where we're looking at being more fully, where we're having our practice more fully integrated in our work, in our thinking, and our planning, and everything that we're striving for, right? Any questions so far? All right, so a lot of what we're going to do as far as our groups are concerned now is around asking a question about where are you on your journey towards racial equity. All right, so we're going to get up again and go journey towards equity. Now, where is equity? Where is equity? If equity came today and said, give me a hug, what would you do? Are you sure? Because equity might look like that. Person is on a corner and wouldn't smell too good, it look too right. What does equity look like? Can you even identify equity first? If equity came and said, hey, my name is Equity, you'd be like, no, your accent is too thick. You gotta go. Right? So think about that while we migrate to the back of the room again. Please migrate to the back of the room. All right, so as far as our thinking about the journey is concerned and where we are on the journey, I'm going to ask you all, remember that we have some materials on the table? All right, can everyone see the screen, one of the three screens? And can everyone see this green rectangle that's around the three stages, the three middle stages, so to speak? So we're gonna put ourselves at tables, right? We may have to join the tables like I mentioned. in terms of thinking about your racial equity journey and where you are on your racial equity journey, right? You may be over here. If you're over here where you're just curious or you haven't really started yet, you're gonna go into this table, into this group, that's our planning group, okay? We're gonna just collapse you into that group. So one reason for that is that's where we begin some activity, and we want everyone to leave here feeling like there is some kind of activity, at least even thinking activity about racial equity and moving towards that, right? And then so our first group is gonna be for planning, which is where you're thinking actively about this, but you haven't actually taken any action steps yet. Tunisia is gonna help with that, and maybe Mo and or Simone, we're gonna use the leadership board as our committee example and talking about what happens there for that group. For the second group, which is launched, which means you're actually taking some active steps, we're gonna have Miss Shelley and I think Sunita talk about some of that, how they have experienced that at the committee level, and the committee, and as far as the committees that they're on. And then the third group, on the way, Shate is gonna anchor that table, and we're gonna talk about like what it means to be like more actively involved, having more consistency and consistency and commitment in terms of pursuing racial equity principles and activities are concerned to achieve certain outcomes. Are there any questions, or is there anything I can do to clarify anything I've said so far? No? Okay, so we have planning up top with Tunisia. And that's for folks who are just planning, you haven't taken any action steps yet, or you may just be curious but not necessarily feeling like you have been active as far as being on the racial equity journey is concerned. For participating in the groups. Okay. So as usual, we have
It started getting good, man. It started getting good.
so, folks, we know we have constraints, money and time.
Money and time.
We do not have enough time to dive as deeply as we would.
I can tell if you are using your bias.
So for folks who have additional comments, I want to invite you. We're going to see if we can spend 3 minutes to 4 minutes. 1 minute to each group to share up to 1 minute as many reflections or insights as you can in one minute. We will ask you all, however, please to scan the QR code. Go to the third option that tells you to share, gives you the link to share your reflections on the questions from the group. And you can share as extensively as you want. Then we'll go through and read the materials again, right? So that's scan the QR code. The third option, I think, says something about reflections, group reflections. And you can, the questions that we ask are there. You can put your responses to the individual questions. Put those in digitally. Jose has also offered to give us some paper if folks want to write something down on a hard sheet on a paper. We can get that if you aren't able to do that digitally right now. So please put your reflections there. We're going to start with the planning group in terms of 1 minute. I need somebody to literally use a stopwatch. We're going to give each group 1 minute. And then we'll also spend some time to get some feedback from the folks online. Okay? So planning group, who is our timer in this group? Each group, accountability, we need a timer in each person to time each group 1 minute. Starting now. 60, 59, 58.
All right, I'm on it.
Please, who's gonna share?
So yeah, I can share a little bit about our group. So we actually did not deal with individual issues. We dealt with more systematic issues, and we jumped into the question about the leadership board and how racial equity thoughts and practices have made a difference or not made a difference. And then talked about some of the, inherent conflicts that we have getting to that point, and didn't really come to any firm conclusions. So anyway, more systematic than personal.
Thanks, group.
Yay. Clap it up.
Launch group.
Launch. We'll launch this webinar.
Here's my check on statement too. Okay, we're wrapping it up, 60, 59,
Who's the
58.
timer for this
And
group?
the timer over here, 58, 57. We're gonna summarize it. What we did was just give the introduction of what we're doing. Because it's getting good over there, it's getting good in planning. Heading into Miss Shelley's speaking time and whatnot. Someone comes in over here and talk about the launch. So the launch is launching. The way that it's launching is by showing how it's supported, what we do out loud, what we do in the front, what information that we gather and share. We know that it looks different for data than it does if I'm in your face, want to touch your hair. So we know that we want to integrate the racial equity framework for SPI in the launch is what we've done with SEF. Get supported, speak on it through our lens, we spoke on it through a lived experience lens. In your agency, the dialogue that should already have been started because you launched should be continuous. The data that you are observing should also incorporate a part of the framework so that we are accurately reflecting and the equity and the folks and the disaggregation is accurate. And the final thought for the launch was that we're doing a great and wonderful job, yes.
Thank you very much. On the way, group.
All right.
Getting good, right?
Do you have a mic?
Can you, okay.
Yes.
Our group had a lot to say. Changing terminology is important, making sure that we have shared understanding, implementing strategies like the racial equity framework, considering education, also historical context and impact, understanding previous discrimination and how it impacts the COC, organizations that, the importance of organizations that promote within, so using positional power to bring others to the table and break generational systemic outliers. Also thinking about trauma and serving the community that's impacted by the system and not perpetuating that trauma, acknowledging the impact of whiteness and how to implement change around self-reflection, unintentional bias and awareness, showing up and listening with your full heart, passionate about justice, making sure you have shared understanding about terms like justice, not being afraid or uncomfortable, taking risks, speaking up even if your voice shakes. Progress has been language, but not necessarily a culture shift of progress, so continuing to practice. How do we prepare our system? Everyone said reparations. Clap that up if you feel like it. Empower. How do we, as a group, continue conversation and dialogue and provide community listening sessions like this? Not just trying to meet a metric, but remembering that there are real people, real lives that's being impacted by our systems, honoring historical trauma and righting those wrongs, and where we are as a historical context, don't perpetuate those issues. And then educating yourself and others, and also using personal places of power to lift each other up, and providing platforms for others who are considered oppressed, and joining the racial equity framework.
Are we able to get a share from anyone online? Like for 30 seconds?
Morgan dropped the feedback survey link
Okay,
feedback and reflections link. I think if somebody wants to drop the slide deck link, pick that up, the original get written.
Yeah.
No,
all right, so in that case, thank you all for participating. I want to look at a couple of things folks said yesterday. I think it was the folks on the disability panel was a reminder in terms of not giving up and just being resilient in this work. This is tough work. Many of us may not be here for the next meeting. We may know folks who may not be around for that meeting. If we are around, bring yourselves here in a way that reminds us that we're continuing to just push forward with this work. It's continuous work, it's difficult work, takes a toll, but it is also necessary work based on the realities that we face. So thank you all for being here and for the work that you do.